COVID-19. It's mad cow disease, SARS, MERS, Ebola, Asian bird flu, African swine fever, which are both currently running rampant still in China. These sorts of things have all been meat-borne pandemics. And so as we look to a future that is not like today, because I don't think anybody wants to be back here in a year, as we look to a future with a safer food supply, we're really talking about cellular agriculture and plant-based meats. It's time to take factory farming out of the equation. And so I really do this show to help people make that connection. And further, I want to give a platform for the consumers and investors to hear from the leaders, the business leaders who are really doing just that, giving us a safer food supply and therefore a safer future by investing in creating and making plant-based food products and cellular agriculture products. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I am a firm believer in cellular agriculture as an answer to so many of the problems that we have today. So I want to bring in Lou Cooperhouse, who is the CEO and President of BlueNalu. He joins me today. Hi, Lou. How are you?
Good afternoon, Elizabeth. So nice to see you again.
So nice to be with you again. I do appreciate your time today, for coming into the office for good internet as you're quarantined alone in the office. But even more than that, I do appreciate everything you're doing with BlueNalu. So I'll set it up for people and then I just will let you take it from there. BlueNalu is a cellular agriculture company that is working on producing fish fillets from cellular agriculture. So I'll let you take it from there.
Well, thanks, Elizabeth, for having me on your show today. To your point, the world is very familiar with plant-based products as being one solution to meet the alternative protein demands that our planet really needs and consumers are really looking for. We're excited to introduce another alternative, cell-based, where actually, in our case, seafood is made directly from fish cells. So this is something coming next on the horizon. On the heels of plant-based is another solution where we can offer consumers an option that will do so much to help our stressed out oceans and provide the world a more safer, sustainable seafood supply that also does not result in the animal harm that we're seeing today and allows fish to remain in the oceans. So this is a tremendous solution. It's a win-win for people, for animals, and the planet by providing a great sustainable solution.
Yes, I love that you say this, and I just want to set it up for people a little bit, because sometimes I hear people say, oh, no animal products at all. But I want to tell people where we are. So fish products, the consumption of fish and seafood is growing dramatically even today. So in Western Europe and in the United States, meat consumption is down, but that's not true for seafood. And particularly in Asia, seafood consumption is up. So, realistically, and those cultures in Asia have been eating seafood for decades. That's not a cultural change that's going to happen anytime soon. And as we look at our oceans that are so entirely, almost to the tune of 6 or 7 times overfished, more than capacity, we need immediate solutions that are sustainable, that give us a secure food source that is free from disease. We can talk about that. And also that, isn't wasteful. So when you think about people eating fish, you're not eating the bones and the scales and the eyes. And so really you're just focusing on using our resources for feeding people, which is the best you can do, really. But let me ask you, I'm just ranting, let me ask you a specific question there. As you focus on cellular agriculture to produce fish fillets, how important is it for you to be first? Because everyone's talking about cellular agriculture with fish, and it seems like there's a lot of equity in being first.
It's not critical for us to be first. I think what's important now is to really be extraordinarily focused on scale production. Being first in a small way is not important. What our focus is on, that this is a global problem and we're addressing a global solution to make the most significant impact in the world over time. That's our focus. So being first is really not important to be in a single restaurant. We really want to be the first, if we want to be first anything, in large scale production and actually having factories around the world providing cell-based seafood products to consumers worldwide. to your point, Elizabeth, this is an immediate call for action. Global demand for seafood is at all-time high. You mentioned Asia. As the GDP in Asia continues to increase, there's more wealth in Asia. Today, they're already consuming 4 times per capita consumption of seafood as we are in America. So the demand for seafood will only increase as wealth increases. But the problem, as we all know, is supply is diminishing and in fact disappearing from our planet for many species we enjoy. So there's a tremendous supply chain gap that will only be much larger in the future. And furthermore, we're all increasingly aware of personal issues like microplastics and environmental pollutants and toxins and mercury. BlueNalu offers a sustainable solution without any of those negative issues, but also one that does what we're all very concerned about as well, is really diminishes the tremendous amount of animal suffering that occurs today through the seafood industry. So it really offers, again, a win-win-win all around, a more healthier product for people, a humane product, and clearly a very sustainable solution. Just to reinforce one point, today in America, for example, 94% of our seafood is imported, according to the FDA, 94%. So what does that mean? That means that seafood is coming from maybe 9,000 miles away from somewhere in Asia to New York City. Along the way, there might be 30, maybe 50% bycatch, a horrible problem. And along the way as well, there might be a 60% yield on a weighted average basis at the restaurant. So the amount of seafood that people are consuming is really a very poor relationship for the amount of seafood that's harvested and the fish that's harvested in the first place. So with BlueNalu, it's 100% yielded seafood fillet, not the 30 to 50% bycatch, not the 60% yield, not coming from 7,000 miles away, but maybe instead coming from 70 or even 700 miles away, dramatically reducing the environmental footprint that we're seeing today, and displacing the amount of imports that this country is seeing today as well. So again, it's really a huge advantage in so many ways to our planet and to consumers and certainly to ocean life.
Well, I just can't stress enough what a fan I am and how important I think this is for solutions to so many of our problems: sustainability, feeding the world, saving our oceans, animal cruelty, of course, and also the waste that you talk about. And also this addresses the issues of factory fish farming as well. Horrible pollutants. Not to mention that the fish often come out very deformed and, diseased, et cetera. And then, of course, you're eating, not you vegans out there, but, other people are eating these food sources. So in addition to anything wild that might have mercury or microplastics, you're talking about factory farmed fish, which are disgusting for the antibiotics and all the waste that is done there. I don't mean waste as in not using all the fish. I mean that they're all excrement in the same place. This boils down to the seafloor and it causes enormous pollutants. So I really do believe that this is the future. Let's talk about your next steps, because you've had some very exciting things happen. You've just raised about $20 million and you're using it for a pilot plant, because what you said is that you don't necessarily care about being the first in the first restaurant. You want to be the first to really scale. I mean, you're more than being first, you want to do this right. So tell me about your factory, your big raise, congratulations, and when you think we'll be seeing some cellular agriculture fish.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, we're really excited. We're just announced maybe a month ago or so that we raised a $20 million A round in this category. What's really exciting about the investors that we had, it was really a demonstration of global interest. We actually had 11 nations participate from Asia, from North and South America, and from Europe and the Middle East. So it was really, and that's been our from day one, kind of been our approach as we see this as a global challenge and a global solution, but to really bring a global investor base with us as well. And we're real excited also to announce that we brought in 5 strategic investors, organizations that could help us with some of the really critical things that will allow us to be successful. Kind of 2 core elements. One is supply chain, meaning the raw materials, the ingredients, to really have our products ultimately over time be at price parity and hopefully better than conventional seafood products. So this is not about a product for the wealthy. This is a product for the masses. And we're at BlueNalu, we focused on day one for what we call a platform technology, really developing a broad array of seafood products that can be manufactured for consumers around the world, because people really enjoy very different kinds of products. So the fact that we have this really broad approach, and we've been able to really attract this broad investor pool as well, we're really excited to announce 2 supply chain partners, being Nutreco, one of the world's largest suppliers of aquaculture feed, based in the Netherlands, and also Griffith Foods, based in the Chicago area, but also having a global footprint, and a company that really focuses on kind of sensory optimization. So they're really a food science company, and Nutreco is really an aquaculture feed company. So if you think about it, what we're doing is, and we'll talk more about our process, we're feeding fish cells the same things that might be found in the nutrients that fish might eat in an aquaculture industry. Amino acids, salt, sugars, and fats, and so forth. And the vitamins, the omegas that end up in the product that seafood lovers enjoy. But we've also brought in 3 other investors that really can help us get our product to the market, bring in support with operation, sales, marketing, distribution infrastructure. These include Pomoan, a leading sustainable company based in Korea, South Korea, but also Sumitomo, a similar, a very large multinational based in Japan. And third, Rich Products, based in upstate New York, with also a global presence, that also has some value-added seafood products that are available to consumers today. So we're real excited to partner with all 5 of these companies in various ways. So back to being our focus on scale production and really hitting this at the global level as aggressively as possible. Partners like this and more that we see happening in the future will really help us to bring our products to market the most effective, cost-efficient way as possible, and really leveraging the strength that these partners bring to the table. So we're really poised for that. And one of the other questions, Elizabeth, was kind of our timing. We're really focused on the biology aspect of our business to really develop this low-cost solution for the feed that our cells require, the operations and engineering, the regulatory aspects, and also the partners that we talked about, and really working in parallel to really accomplish all these tasks concurrently. And our goal, Elizabeth, is to actually launch our products in the market in Southern California initially, sometime in the second half of 2021. So the next 18 to 24 months, we're excited to be able to launch our products here in Southern California. That's pending approval by the FDA. So we're actually, that's part of the process, and we're currently in collaboration with them to really provide very transparent information to them so they can have confidence in the safety of our products and how they should be appropriately labeled. And we're doing the various documentation they require. At the same time, we're getting ready for our commercial readiness to be able to launch in a very small way. But that small way will be really significant milestone, because we'll have the products in commerce officially in roughly 18 months' time. So it's a very exciting, very first big step for us, kind of like landing a man on the moon in our case, just the first footprint.
Well, so I want to reiterate that for people, because I'm not sure that people listening are understanding what a scientific feat this is and how big this would be for the future of our food, our security, and the planet. I am so encouraged to hear this timeline of potentially 18 months, because when you and I saw each other, gosh, it was just 6 months ago, you were telling me 4 to 8 years. And now that has really moved up, and I'm guessing it's because of all the partnerships that you just described, not just raising money for this pilot factory, which is going to allow you to do these launches sort of in California and smaller scale before you go global. And it's clear that you are going to go global. You have these global partners. So you have this big raise, but also you have these experts from around the planet. It's really a big deal. And again, just for anybody just joining us, if you could give us really quickly the 2-sentence description again of what is cultured meat, cellular agriculture fish.
We actually refer to it two different ways, as cellular aquaculture.
Aquaculture.
And also cell-based seafood. So,
Okay.
so people are familiar with plant-based. This is cell-based. So what we're literally doing, Elizabeth, and for your audience out there, is we're literally taking a biopsy from a fish. So if you think about for consumers that are familiar with seafood, there's really three types of cells that are actually found in the seafood that people consume. They're muscle cells. So if you say, wow, that fish is really lean, well, it has a lot of muscle cells in it. There's also fat cells, which gives it that mouthfeel and that flavor that many of us that do consume seafood enjoy. And there's also what's called connective tissue cells. So there's really three types of cells that are found primarily in the seafood. So a product that's a little more fatty might have more muscles, might have more fat cells, and one that's more lean will have more muscle cells. So what we're doing is we're actually growing those cells independently. So we've actually found a way to actually proliferate those cells in really large volumes. So what this will ultimately look like, in the future, when we get to larger and larger volumes, is a bit like a brewery, a microbrewery, if you will, that has large stainless steel tanks, but not having beer or wine in them, but actually having fish cells in them. So we're familiar with cultured yogurt, and many products in the food industry are made in these various types of ways. They're using fermentation technologies and other means. This is not fermentation, but we're actually growing these cells in large stainless steel vats. And then we're actually assembling the cells into the finished portions. So they actually have the same texture, the same nutritional profile, the same amount of healthy omegas, but they do not have mercury, microplastics, any environmental pollutants. So they have the positives that seafood offers. And I think to the earlier point, consumers are more or less shifting away from red meat, pork, and poultry towards seafood on a global basis, because they're aware that seafood also offers many health benefits. So what we can actually do is offer an even healthier product and even offer a product, for example, it has no mercury. So for women that are pregnant or nursing, can now actually feel comfortable eating cell-based seafood because it does not have any mercury. So today there's a warning to have 0 portions, 1 or 2 to 3, based on the type of fish that it is. With BlueNalu, you could have as much seafood as you choose. So we're really opening the door to many vulnerable populations to really enjoy seafood with comfort and trust and confidence.
Yes, and we haven't even talked about it not including hormones and antibiotics. Again, that's not something you worry about perhaps with wild fish, but it's absolutely 100% a concern with factory farmed fish. And most fish, because we have overfished the oceans, most fish does come from factory farms at this point. Do I have that right?
It's about 50-50 between what's caught from the oceans and what's harvested through aquaculture. But you're right, Elizabeth, it's only increasing what's coming from farming, because basically what you've seen over the last 20 years even is a flat line. The amount of seafood coming from the oceans is definitely overfished. There is an awful lot of issues with illegal fishing and overfishing, and boats are going out and just really not coming back with catch. So it's really inefficient. So therefore, because of the inefficiencies they're finding in traditional fishing for wild caught fish, you're seeing an increase in the amount of aquaculture and farming that's occurring, that's making up some of the gap. But the problem is, and the UN has reported very well, that we simply cannot supply the world with protein in the decades to come. The demand will increase, the supply will not be able to keep up. There will be enormous gap in our supply chain. So cell-based seafood, cellular aquaculture is clearly a huge solution for that, and all the more reason why our goal is to work as aggressively as possible to fill that gap and provide this really significant supply chain solution.
I'm sorry if I keep looking down at my notes. It's because everything you're saying is so fascinating that I'm writing down all these new questions that I have for you right now. You're talking about safe food for, let's say, pregnant women, or because you can control the situation so much And at the same time, it's as natural as, let's say, Greek yogurt. So we all have had yogurt at some point in our lives. Cultured yogurt, Greek yogurt, it's the same thing. You're culturing these cells, but because you're not going to have things like mercury, you know, pregnant women can have it, which is wonderful. Is the same true for something like COVID-19? Just correct me if I've got this as a stretch or if I have this wrong, but you know, the disease that we're seeing coming out of eating animals from wet markets, bats to pangolins to people, etc. Can you, I guess because you can control your cellular source, you know that everything is free from disease?
You're definitely, you know, heading the right path, Elizabeth. I think what BlueNalu is all about is really making, you know, I think what's happening around the world is there's an increased awareness about our vulnerability as a planet. And I think COVID-19 really brings up that we don't know what's going to happen next. You know, will there be an environmental disaster? Will our oceans warm suddenly? Will there be a huge algae bloom? I think, you know, it's, you know, this is a historic challenge to our planet that's unrivaled. And I think, you know, we've all been warned about all the challenges that we face with climate change and other potential environmental disasters. So now's the time for this whole industry to embrace solutions like plant-based and cell-based products from the meat, poultry, pork, and seafood category, because these are a sustainable solution, but these are also a trusted solution. Something, to your point, that we could have confidence in, that are grown in a transparent way, that are grown consistently, that is something that we could be confident that is in fact safe. And that's really why we're talking so clearly and openly with the FDA, and to really provide the information in an extraordinarily transparent way about what exactly we're doing, because what we're doing is ultimately creating a solution that will have so many benefits. You know, on top of all the benefits that we talked about for the planet and everything else, you know, even at the restaurant level, providing a product with 100% yield, has no bones, no heads, no tails. You know, it doesn't bring in cross-contamination. We talk about safety. A lot of issues with food safety happen. My education is actually microbiology and food science. It was all because of cross-contamination from the skin of something to the insides of an animal, for example, which is why we have issues with ground meat, for example. The same thing happens if you cut through a pineapple, which might be dirty on the outside and you contaminate the inside, or you cut through a fish and you contaminate the outside with the inside where it's so full of contaminants. So all that being said, with BlueNalu's products, there's basically does not start with any bacterial counts because it's made in a controlled, clean environment. So the product will degrade the same way fish degrades, but from a starting point of 0, essentially. You know, and then it will certainly degrade in your refrigerator because it is fish. It is seafood products, but it really begins with a level of confidence that that people should be really pleased with.
So I want to switch a little bit to the business aspect of this. I've talked about it a lot on this show. Animal agriculture is so incredibly inefficient. It's a bad business equation for any business person. I'll talk about what I know best, which is chicken and cows. So if you're going to put in 9 calories of grain to get 1 calorie back of chicken, that's putting in 90 cents to get a dime back. Nobody would do that. You're going to put in about 35 calories of grain to get 1 back for cows. Very inefficient. And the time it takes to get this food and the return, and then the disease and the waste, and then the pollution offset and the trees that need to be cut, et cetera. So these are very bad business equations. And from what you're telling me about the waste and the yields, the same is true with our current ways of overfishing the oceans and factory farming fish. So I'm encouraged by what you're doing, of course, and that your time frame has moved up. What I do have a question about is one of the most important partnerships that you have, which is with Nutrico, and they are the suppliers of the food that the cells need to grow. Is that correct?
Correct. So I mean, so they're one of the suppliers. So we're really working in collaboration with Nutrico and other suppliers on the feed side. You're right. So I think what we're we're really very focused on is actually optimizing, what exactly, if you think about it today in aquaculture, there's a relationship between feed and food. So here we have living animals that need the appropriate feed for their hearts, their lungs, their spinal cords, nervous systems. In our case, we don't have any of those things. We're growing fish cells. So our relationship is between feed and fish cells, not living fish. So we're really excited to collaborate with a partner like Nutreco at the unique distinction between the fish cells and the living fish, and what exactly the cell needs that the living fish does not, and vice versa. So we're learning from each other. It's an extraordinary partnership, and we see many more of these partnerships as well that really helps us to really be as smart as possible as we design the optimal fish feed for our fish cells. So they're literally growing in these large stainless steel tanks that we talked about. The industry might call them bioreactors, but they're a bit like large tanks that you've seen in a brewery. But basically, our cells are bathed in this nutrient-rich media that allows them to grow and grow and grow to super large volumes. And then we're literally not harvesting fish, but we're harvesting fish cells to actually become fish fillets or any other form that consumers are looking for. And I just want to make a comment on your earlier point, Elysabeth, about 4 to 8 years. It really is still like 4 to 8 years before we get more like hopefully towards the 45-year period where we see the first large-scale factory. So large-scale production where we have our first factory is probably in that 5-year time frame, but the 18-month time frame is one in which we could get to market in a small way. And then as you can imagine, it takes several years from that point on to then design, engineer, build the factory, and gain the distribution. So we're looking at 18 months followed by another 3.5 years or 5 years altogether before we see our first large-scale factory, hopefully launching with some products in a very large metropolitan market, and then many more to follow after that.
And this is the future, undeniably so. This is the future. And many people will say to me, oh gosh, I see JBS getting into meat, Cargill getting into meat, Nestle getting into dairy, Dannon getting into dairy, Maple Leaf getting into meat, and how they wish that weren't so. But I think some of these partnerships are critical to getting distribution lines and to having deep pockets and to getting more funding. So Nutreco, if I've got that right now, has worked with making feed for factory farms. I don't want to be disparaging here, but I also want to correctly explain, and large fish farms. Is there any concern, or did you have any hesitation in that partnership that then the feeds, as I understand it in factory farming, the feeds that they give the animals is also to make them grow extremely quickly? Is it going to be that sort of kind of feed or fish food or cellular fish food that's going to make it grow so quickly? Is there any concern there, or health concern, or anything we should know about?
Not at all. I think what this is all about, Elizabeth, and you mentioned all these strategic companies that either are suppliers to the food industry or meat, and seafood products, or that are directly manufacturing. We're seeing a change. It's happening. These large companies are entering this space. Why? It's because of the consumers. Consumers are demanding new solutions. They want to see more sustainable products in the market. And companies like Nutreco and Cargill and many others also recognize that we just need to feed the planet. The current solution will not sustain the world in the decades to come. So companies that are frankly just smart are really entering this category because they realize what the UN has said for many years: we cannot feed the planet in the years to come. We need to find new solutions. So while wild-caught and farm-raised seafood will continue to be required to feed those that consume seafood, embracing hopefully increasingly sustainable practices, cell-based seafood offers a third solution. And hopefully over time it will take an even larger market share and fill the gap that consumers are seeking for seafood in the decades to come. And many countries around the world rely on the seafood industry for their own economic vitality. So we'll find the consumers that specifically are looking for our products. We think it'll be a significant percentage of the population. In fact, many third-party research studies have predicted, you might have seen this, Elizabeth, too, that cell-based seafood, one study has demonstrated, is anticipated to have a 35% market share by the year 2040 of all global meat consumption, with plant-based having about 25% market share, and conventional products going from today's 100% level down to 40, and literally becoming unconventional by the year 2040, just 2 decades from now. So we're on the front end of a global change in consumer behavior and sustainable practices.
Yeah, I didn't realize that that was the number for cellular agriculture, but I did know that that was the number for plant-based meats. And every little bit matters, because meat and dairy, if you care about this perspective, if you want to see those gone from the planet, factory farming for meat and dairy, they exist on very small margins. So, you know, to take away their lion's share of the market, it's actually not a sustainable business model at all for them. And I anticipate that just the lack of business will make them go away. Depends, of course, on government subsidies. That's a whole different show. But I just wanted to pick up on something that you said, and then I'll move it along a little bit. But you were saying that it's, oh gosh, now I've lost my question. No, this is why I have to write notes for myself. Okay, it'll come back. What I wanted to ask you on another subject is, I noticed that you have partners from around the world, which is so encouraging to me. And I'm wondering, I am guessing everyone has a sustainability mission, and that's why they're joining you. And they also know the big money that's at stake here if you can get, 35% of the world's seafood consumption. So, I know what I wanted to say, because the seafood that exists in the ocean is not enough to supply us when we go from 7 billion people to 10 or 11 billion people. So it's not even really an option that we would consider continuing to fish from the oceans when you have almost 11 billion people on the planet, and that's where we're going. So really, as we look to the future, this is not just the smart decision, it's almost like the only decision, this and plant-based fish. But I'm wondering, what is your primary interest of your partners? Is it really a sustainable mission, impact investing, or are they just seeing the dollar signs?
It's not the dollar signs at all. It's all about sustainability. And if it's about dollar signs, it's about recognizing that the world is changing. And anybody in the food industry, and I have a 35-year background in the food industry. The food industry is consumer driven. We don't manufacture what we want to make. We want to manufacture what consumers want to buy. It's all because of consumer behavior. Consumers are changing. Consumers, when I was brought up in the food industry, were more focused on products that are healthy for themselves or their family. Consumers have become a vehicle for communicating values and experiences and expectations. And so it's because of consumer behavior and consumer attitudes, we are embracing sustainability. We are recognizing that the food that we are procuring and feeding our family and our friends it's about ourselves and our values. And that's what's really changing. And every food company is realizing it's happening faster than they ever predicted. The growth of plant-based foods is just is an enormous, it's a mountainous change that really happened relatively overnight when Beyond Meat had their IPO, and Impossible Foods is really right there with them, really leading the market in awareness with plant-based burgers. Everybody woke up, and now you're seeing large companies get into the space. And just one more point I want to bring up, Elizabeth, too, is what's really unique about cell-based seafood and about seafood in general. One thing I really was very much part of in my career was this whole movement towards local foods. Know where your foods come from. I think historically that meant your foods maybe came from your local farmer, and you really thought more about produce. And obviously plant-based products, and also encourage people to eat more fruits and vegetables. But I think as we learn more about where your food came from the farmer, and then it kind of went to not the farmer, but the farm animal and the sea animal for that matter. And I think what BlueNalu is doing is redefining local when it comes to seafood. We can literally displace the current situation where fish are coming from as I mentioned, 7,000, 9,000 miles away, 94% imported in America, with the tremendous loss of life due to bycatch, and also loss, all the waste associated with yield, with 100% yield of product, and local meaning like local farming of vegetables, maybe from 100 miles away. So it's really a game changer. It's a total disruptor to the supply chain. What's missing from the seafood industry, there's a reason why you go to a menu at a restaurant and it says market price on the seafood, and it's presented as catch of the day. What it really means behind the scenes is, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'll have available to you, Mr. and Miss Customer, or what price it might be, because the supply chain is very variable and vulnerable. What BlueNalu creates is stability in the supply chain. So it really creates a local solution with a consistent product, with consistency and safety and trust and transparency, but also something that you can be proud of to serve on your menu. So we're so excited at really providing a solution that offers benefits on so many different levels.
I love that you're saying this. You started out saying that, this is really driven by consumers. And I just want to remind everyone that you are so incredibly powerful. You watch TV and you look at politicians right now and you think, either to the left or the right, wherever you stand, like, oh my gosh, they're all a bunch of crazy people. How can I affect anything? You can, because they're all after your dollars, and you are so incredibly powerful. You don't have to wait 4 years to vote. You vote. You can vote in 4 years, of course, as well, and you should, but you vote every day, 3 times a day, right on your plate. And when you align your purchasing power with your personal values, you see a shift. In fact, that's the shift we're talking about today. You have created that shift. You want more sustainable products. You don't want animal cruelty. You want safer products. You want stable products, and you want clean, fresh products. And you can't get any fresher than basically right from the petri dish, really, the cells that are unharmed by antibiotics and hormones and mercury and plastic, etc. So I love what you're saying. And I also love that you're saying that your partners are responding to consumers. So of course they do see the dollars, but they're also responding to consumers, and they are doing the math in their head that we do not have the resources as a planet to continue on the food source, the food system that we have. None of us took a horse and buggy to work when we used to actually go to work. Now we're all quarantined, but we finally got the car, and people were resistant to that. And they said, oh, you'd have to make roads and you'd pave them, and then you have to create this car, and then people have to buy them, and they're so expensive. You would never look back. No one's taking a horse and buggy. No one is even typing on the typewriter. They all have something called a computer, and they don't stand in line for stamps. They send things called emails on the interweb. Change is possible. Change can happen quickly. And I think we're going through that right now. Let me ask a question rather than continuing talking here, which I could for a while. So we are in COVID-19, coronavirus crisis. China plays such an important role here, 1.4 billion people on the planet. Are you having any discussions with the Chinese government? Is there anything that you can share about where you think the direction of China is going to go in terms of landing on cellular agriculture?
I think I can't speak to China specifically, Elizabeth, but what I can say is that we've been really excited by the level of interest in Asia overall. Obviously, just like the United States has made up so many distinct populations with different consumer tastes, the same is true in every country in Asia. And what we're really excited by is the regulatory, at the regulatory level. I think one thing that we haven't talked yet about, we just talked briefly about it, is today cell-based seafood or cell-based meat or poultry is not approved by any regulatory agency that I'm aware of in the world. We're very excited that the FDA has been an early adopter in embracing the technology and trying to better understand it, and asking companies like BlueNalu to come early and often to speak to them so they could really help develop the appropriate methodology around that. We're seeing the same level of interest in various countries in Asia as well. And the EU is also interested, and we're seeing more and more startup companies in the category that are being launched, working together, speaking to various regulatory authorities. So back to your point about Asia in general, if you look at the UN data, China will be the #1 net increase in consumption of all seafood as you look out the next 10 years. If you look at where is the incremental growth coming in global seafood consumption, it's something close to 80% is coming out of Asia. So all the net new growth is in Asia, and over half of that is coming specifically from China. So Korea, Japan, other countries in Southeast Asia are certainly making up the balance of that number. So therefore, BlueNalu is very focused on not just the American consumer, and as we said earlier, this is a global challenge, a global opportunity. We're very focused on the Asian market because that is where today the greatest amount of seafood consumption occurs. It's literally over 4 times per capita consumption of seafood throughout Asia than there is in the U.S. So as much seafood as we consume, it's 4 times that. And as the wealth increases in Asia, it will only be higher. So therefore, we're really focused, and which is also why we're excited to land initially 2 partners, one in Japan and one in South Korea, to really help us understand the markets there and how we could, most appropriately enter the market during the coming years, initially focused on both Japan and South Korea.
So do you foresee in the future that because we talked about before that you're going to start on a small scale in a smaller market and kind of grow from there? Do you anticipate that will be in the U.S. or in Asia?
Will initially definitely be in the U.S. And I think, our focus is to launch in the U.S. And this is something that's, just to be, totally candid about it, this has never been done before. Nobody's ever built a factory. There's so many unique milestones in getting this to market. This is, to use a seafood term, this is uncharted waters. And we're literally very excited by what we've accomplished thus far. But we also recognize that this is kind of a staged process, a phased process to get from one level to the next. We've actually identified, if you will, a 5-phase approach. Where we call phase 5 is the first large-scale factory. And that's one we talked about will be in the next 4 to 6 year time frame. And that phase 3, as we call it, is the first time that BlueNalu enters in the marketplace in a small way. So again, we want to really perfect everything in a small way, then perfect everything in a large way, and then it becomes, if you will, a food term, cookie cutter opportunity to really manufacture similar factories around the world. Let's get the first small one done just right. Let's get the first large one done just right, and then we'll continue to scale this up as we go forward.
Yes, I just love what you're saying, because I have a question that I want to read, but before I do that, I want to say this is so cutting edge. So I'm so grateful that you're spending your time here with me on the Plant-Based Business Hour and Jane Unchained Live, because this is truly changing history. It is so very exciting. Before I get to this question from Ariana, I do want to say, so as you map out for us your plans of when you're going to market, you had a very exciting event where yellowtail was cooked and served, not served, but demonstrated raw and cooked up, and you were showing everyone that that the product is there, that this isn't futuristic sci-fi, it's really there. And I'll just say as a little side note, don't ever do that again without inviting me.
Next time.
So tell us a little bit about that event, and then I'm going to ask Ariana's question.
Absolutely, Elizabeth. So we had a very exciting milestone event in December, so just a few months ago. And one things we wanted to demonstrate to the world, as I think about food, it's all about taste and quality and functionality. So as you think, what does that actually mean, functionality? So when the way consumers prepare seafood today is really one of 3 kind of macro ways. They might consume it raw, they might consume it cooked, but when they say cooked, it might be grill marked or seared or sauteed or pan fried or fried in oil more aggressively. And they might also prepare it in an acidified marinade. So in a form that people might be familiar with called ceviche or poke or kimchi. So what they're doing is they're taking a raw fish and they're putting an acidic marinade in that fish and technically cooking it with acid, if you will. So what we did at BlueNalu back in December was show that our product had the same structural integrity as conventional fish. And kind of the model product that we used was yellowtail, technically yellowtail amberjack. It's a product that's more familiar to folks in Southern California, used frequently in sushi and other applications. But what we did is we prepared this yellowtail amberjack, cell-based, in a whole mussel form. Means we had a small medallion of fish that was served in products like fish tacos or kimchi, or in the fish tacos, it was actually deep fried in oil. So we actually, frankly, abused it with 350-degree oil, or in a pan. It grill marked. It smelled like fish. It tasted like fish. It is fish. So it was a really big milestone. And to the best of our knowledge, the first time anybody demonstrated, if you will, structural integrity. So basically, our objective is our product will have same as qualities as conventional fish. The nutrition is the same, function is the same. So if you're a restaurateur and you're serving this fish, hey, do what you normally do. It'll respond just right.
Yeah, it's incredible. Really, we are talking about the future of food and creating history right now. It's happening. And we all may be, if I've understood this correctly, depending on what market we're in, we might be able to try this in 18 months to 2 years ourselves. Right. So everybody stay on the lookout for that. I want to ask Ariana's question. I love what new BlueNalu is doing. She says, but how will people store this seafood? I hear it's trickier than normal.
Not at all. In fact, the seafood that we'll provide will be no different than the seafood that you might be familiar with. So, as I mentioned earlier, what we won't have is the initial bacterial counts that you might have normally with seafood, but the product will then be stored in your refrigerator or your freezer, no different than regular fish. It will arguably have a longer shelf life in your refrigerator because the product will begin with, and frankly, be like a brewery. The product will be, quite clean, and just like products that when you read the labels now, it might have, for example, a long shelf life, but when you open the container, it will deteriorate pretty quickly. So, answer your question, you'll store it the same way. It freezes the same, refrigerates the same. It might be even in a shelf-stable form. It'll be no different than traditional seafood because it is traditional seafood.
It's amazing. It's history really in the making. It's so fascinating. Okay, so I have a couple exit questions for you here. I think you've sort of answered my first favorite one, which is always what predictions do you see for the future? And I think you're saying you're seeing seafood within 18 to 24 months on a small scale, and then you're going from 4 to 5 years for larger scale. So very exciting. What do you wish that you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
What do I wish I knew 10 years ago that I know now? That's a tough question, Elizabeth. I guess, one thing I prided myself on in my career was to really be, kind of on the front end of consumer trends. And I've been fortunate throughout my career to really be on new business startups and really being very aware of new food technologies and food trends and where they come together. But I think to your earlier point, it's all about consumer behavior. So what I saw happening 10 years ago, I'll put it that way, was a shift. Mm-hmm. I saw, again, that change in consumer behavior. And maybe it began with places like Starbucks, which started talking about, knowing where your beans come from, and the whole, and some of the sustainability messaging that started maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I really started to witness this whole shift. And I said, I think that food will become, if you will, a bit more of a new type of commerce. It's how you communicate and express yourself through food. So as you mentioned to all of your viewers, your viewers are making the difference. They are out there choosing products that are not just healthy for themselves, but healthy for the planet. And they're making a statement, and they're asking their grocers, as soon as these are available, I'd love to see these plant-based and cell-based solutions available. But we're seeing independently retailers, food service operators reaching out to us, as are large food manufacturers, There clearly is a transformation that's occurring on our planet. And I think, frankly, this pandemic is just really heightening all of our awareness about how vulnerable we all are. All the messaging about climate change. We're only 2 weeks away or 3 weeks away, Elizabeth, from Earth Day, the 50th anniversary. And I think now is the time for all of us to just to really shout out and really ask for a change. So I didn't exactly answer your question, but I think what I did see 10 years ago was which has come increasingly true, is all about consumers really focused on making a difference and embracing change from the foods that they eat.
I couldn't agree more. And maybe a short answer if you have it. Do you remember the moment something clicked in your head and you said, this is going to be the future? You maybe don't. It maybe wasn't one moment in time. I mean, I had a moment for myself when I remember saying like, that's it, I'm vegan today. But I wonder if you have anything in your head that went like, yep, that's the future.
Yeah, I guess there was a moment, Elizabeth, or a period of time. So as I mentioned in my career, I've been very involved with, introducing new food products, for many large companies and many small businesses. And so basically, I really witnessed the birth of plant-based very much firsthand, really supporting many small companies and large ones with their business startups. And I saw plant-based cheese, plant-based burgers. Mm-hmm. But to your point, in 2013, which was the first demonstration of a cell-based burger, and it was demonstrated, as you mentioned the word before, in a petri dish. And I said, that is a phenomenal, transformative concept. If you can actually make the animal without the animal, with all the same attributes, without maybe processed ingredients or other things that people might be concerned about, and the ingredient statement just says what it is. It's seafood, it's meat, it's pork, but it was made from a biopsy of a cell. That is a game changer. And when I saw that happen in 2013, I found myself speaking about food trends and technologies and actually calling this the Holy Grail. And I started to ask myself, where really is the opportunity? And I said, my God, it's seafood. As consumers that is the most fragile supply chain, in my opinion, on the planet. The fact that it's coming from oceans, they don't call it catching, they call it fishing. Land animals, can be predicted, they can be seen. Sea animals, we don't know what we're going to catch. We don't know what kind of problems we might have. It's a really vulnerable situation that could potentially get really, really worse. So I just said to myself, somewhere in the, mid 2010s there, that, my God, the opportunity in cell-based seafood really is, can be extraordinarily transformative. And the more I started talking about it, studying it, and I started speaking about it in public presentations, and sure enough, I ran into a venture community that was listening and said, we're right with you. Can you help put together a team that could really make this happen? And sure enough, we got launched just a little over 2 years ago. We've come a long way since then, Elizabeth. I'm really excited at our progress thus far and excited for what the future will bring as well.
Yes, I love what you say, and I want to say that the opposite is true as well, in that this is such a changing technology and it's where everything is going. And the opposite as well, in that if we stay with what we have now, there's nothing more destructive to our oceans, to our land, to our water sources, even to our air pollution and cutting down trees and to global warming than factory farming and factory fish farming and pillaging our oceans. So we don't have a choice. This is the future. We're going full steam ahead. I want to thank Philippa Kingsley, Michelle Alfano, Tom Vincel, Julie Goodman, Pia Fiera, all for saying hi today. I really appreciate that. Brendan, just quick scroll here. Brendan, Wallace, you guys, thanks for tuning in. A couple quick exit questions. If you're having a bad day, is there one phrase that you say to yourself to get yourself back in a better mood? So I always say nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky.
Eyes on the ocean.
Eyes on the ocean. Oh, good for you. Okay, you've had a busy day. You've been traveling, running around. What's the one meal you can always make? You walk through your house. It takes 10 minutes. It's super easy. It's always good.
One meal I can always make?
Can you make anything?
Well, I try my best, but I enjoy No, I guess I live, unfortunately, on a lot of snacking, but that really helps me get through you mentioned earlier about 3 meals a day. I'm probably part of the community that enjoys about 7 small meals a day. So I just keep on, my ability to really keep driving forward is just really continually taking advantage of snacks, and hopefully not too many that are bad for me.
Well, so that's what I was going to ask. What's your favorite snack then? Your go-to snack, you always have it on you.
There are peanut M&Ms in the office. That happens, but also an awful lot of the bars that are out there are really quite good as well.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're interested in bars, if you want something that's super fast and easy, so you don't have to make anything, but it tastes just like a bar, but it's super healthy, is dates. Get yourself a box of dates, the medjool dates if possible, because they're so good and sweet and wet. But if you can't, whatever, a bag of dates, a box of dates, and salted cashews. And just kind of eat them at the same time. It's like the original sports bar. It's got some fat in there. It's got some salt. It's got some sweet, but none of the wrappers and all that stuff. But anyway, I want to thank you, Lou Cooperhouse, for all that you're doing, for really changing the future of food so that we can have a safe, sustainable, cruelty-free, solid food supply as we go from 7 billion people to almost 11 billion people on the planet. Without you, I'm really not sure where we'd be. I'm not exaggerating. This is the future, everyone. Wrap your minds around it. Get used to it. Use your purchasing dollars to align with your personal values, and it's going to lead you to be buying things like cellular aquaculture and, of course, plant-based foods. Lou, how can people reach out to you if they have a question?
I think that we might have made available to you. We're certainly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to answer any further questions anybody in the audience may have. And we're excited to make all of you future customers and really welcome you as well. So no, thank you all for your support, and thank you, Elizabeth, for your interest in what we're doing. We're really excited.
I am so very interested, which is why the next time you have a demonstration or event, you're going to let me know. I do appreciate you being here on the show. Of course, if anybody has a question for Lou and you end up not being able to find him, you can reach out to me. You can also find me on Facebook right here. Go ahead and follow me at the Elysabeth Alfano Radio Show and Awesome Vegans Podcast. You can listen to my Awesome Vegans Podcast, which is where this will be in about 2 days. You can also go to my YouTube channel, Instagram, LinkedIn, Elysabeth Alfano, I'm there. But of course, every weekday at 1 p.m. for coronavirus times and beyond, it's the Plant-Based Business Hour with me. I'll be here right with you, talking to the leaders in the movement live on Jane Unchained. Lou Cooperhouse, you're the best. I do love you. Thank you for all you do. BlueNalu, everyone, be on the lookout. It is coming in about 18 months. Very exciting. Bye, Lou. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Real pleasure.
So we're still here.